It's time for Recipe of the Day. Now, if you are gearing up for Thanksgiving and looking for casserole ideas, this is perfect for that. But it's also just such a wonderful side dish that it can do that thing I've talked about before, the side dish solution, where you make a really great side dish and then everything else can be really simple. So this is a butternut squash casserole that has a bechamel sauce with roasted butternut squash and then a panko parmesan topping. So it's creamy, it's sweet, it's kind of meaty from that texture of the butternut squash. You know what I mean? And so you can make this casserole and then just have like some chicken breasts and maybe a little bit of rice. You don't even need that. Just some chicken breasts, maybe a few leaves of salad. And that is it, because the creaminess from that casserole is going to be so good. Every mouthful of chicken is going to be so much better because it has that casserole beside it. You see what I mean? Okay. You're not going to believe how easy this is to make for how much delicious flavor it has. So you're going to preheat the oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And then you are using cubed butternut squash. I find it easiest to use either frozen cubed butternut squash, or you can get it already peeled and cubed in the produce section of the grocery store. I do have instructions for peeling and cubing it yourself. But I've told you before that I get kind of an allergic reaction on my hands when I handle the outside of a butternut squash, so I don't like to do that. But you absolutely can. Any of those are going to work, and the recipe does not change whether you're starting with the frozen or the ones that you've cubed yourself or the grocery store cubed already. All the same. Then you take those cubes and you put them into a baking dish with 2 tablespoons of melted butter, a little bit of salt and pepper. Toss it all around and then put that in the oven for 25 minutes until the squash is fork tender. While that's happening, you're making a little mixture that's going to be the topping for the end. You want to get that ready now. Into a medium bowl, measure a cup of Parmesan cheese, a cup of panko breadcrumbs, 2 tablespoons of finely chopped sage leaves. You can use 2 teaspoons of dried rubbed sage instead if you want, or 2 teaspoons of poultry seasoning. Either of those will work. Just make sure your poultry seasoning doesn't have salt in it. It doesn't usually, but double check, because then you'd want to adjust the salt in the rest of the recipe. So that was the Parmesan, the panko breadcrumbs, the fresh sage or dried sage, and another tablespoon of melted butter. Stir that all up. We've talked about this before. It's going to look like the butter can't moisten everything. It's going to kind of clump it first, but you just keep stirring and eventually all the crumbs will be moistened with the butter, and that's going to help them toast up later because every single crumb has a little bit of that fat touching it. You see what I mean? Okay, set that aside. Then you're making essentially a bechamel, but it's a little bit easier than a normal bechamel because we're going to start with some onion sauteed in butter with a little bit of salt, and then you're adding the flour to that onion, and that helps it kind of disperse so it's not going to clump up in the sauce. The flour is not going to clump up in the sauce. You see what I mean? Okay, so what you're doing with the amounts for this is you're getting a medium saucepan, you're adding 3 tablespoons of butter to that, letting them melt, and then you're going in with a half of a large onion, finely chopped up, and then that you saute until it's softened, then stir in the 3 tablespoons of flour. Cook that for about 30 seconds, and then you're going to add in the milk. It's 1.5 cups of whole milk. Add a little bit at a time and just keep stirring and adding, and it's just going to disperse all through there. Also add in a 1/2 teaspoon of granulated garlic and a little bit of grated nutmeg, 1/4 teaspoon. I love using freshly grated nutmeg, but any kind of nutmeg, ground nutmeg is going to be fine. If it's already ground, that is great too. It's 1/4 teaspoon. Keep stirring that until it thickens enough to kind of coat the back of your spoon, and then turn it way down to low and just keep it warm until your squash is done cooking. Once that squash is fork tender from the oven, you take the baking dish out and then pour the sauce over the butternut squash, top it with your breadcrumb mixture. That goes back into the oven for just 10 minutes. You're really just toasting those breadcrumbs, and then that is it. I do say let it stand for about 10 minutes before serving. That's going to stop it from kind of bubbling and sort of tighten it up a little bit so that it doesn't just ooze onto the plate when you serve it. But if you're doing this as part of your bigger Thanksgiving meal, you're going to take it out of the oven. It's going to be like on the buffet table or on the table with all of your people sitting around. So it's going to get that resting time there anyhow. Okay, I will put the link to this recipe in the show notes for this podcast episode, or you can head to cookthestory.com/ROTD and get it there. Everything there is arranged by date. So it's helpful to know that today is November 24th of 2024. And it's also helpful to know that I will be back again tomorrow with another delicious recipe. And yes, it's another side dish for Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving. So make sure you're subscribed and getting all of these episodes. There is a new one every single day, 7 days a week. You can subscribe over there at cookthestory.com/ROTD. You just go to the top of that page. And if you're on your phone, you tap on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, whatever you listen on, and then you can subscribe right from there, or go to your favorite podcast app on your phone and search for Recipe of the Day. You will find me there. I'm Christine Pittman from cookthestory.com, thecookful.com, the all new chicken cookbook. And from this podcast, Recipe of the Day, I hope you have a great day. Let's get cooking.